Hi, welcome to Sue Marie P. My name's Sue and today I'm going to do a red velvet cupcake challenge with spelt flour. I'm going to do two versions, one with real buttermilk and one with homemade buttermilk using oat milk and apple cider vinegar. Is there a difference? Come with me and let's see. Fun facts about red velvet cake. So back in the 1930s, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel made this cake famous. According to what I read on Google, the Southerners have been making red velvet cake for years. Is it British? Is it American? Who knows? Why is it called velvet? Red velvet? Well, the texture of the cake is meant to mimic velvet, so it's got a velvety centre. But is it chocolate or is it vanilla? Well, the red is really a food colouring. Back in the day, they used to use beetroot to colour it red, but now we use red food colouring. Did you know that the red velvet cake is the world's #1 cake? I've never really liked it. I've always thought they're too sweet for me and I don't see what all the fuss is about until I started making my own. I make it with spelt flour, they're moist, they're velvety, not too sweet. I do a little bit of a cream cheese frosting, and the tips to make it velvety is apparently in the buttermilk and the vinegar that's added to the recipe. Anyway, enough of my fun facts, let's get baking. So the first version red velvet cupcake I'm going to do today is with real buttermilk. So we need to pop your oven onto 160 degrees C fan, and in my mixing bowl I'm going to sift the flour. So I've got white spelt flour, so that's 165 grams or 1 cup and a quarter. And this recipe also works well if you just want to use regular flour. So we need to sift that, but we need to sift it with cocoa powder, just 1 tablespoon. And we've got some baking soda in here. So that's just, what have I got? 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So let's sift that all together. And I'm going to do a reverse creaming method. That's where the butter goes in with the flour to start with and we mix all that together. I've tried various recipes over the last, I don't know, couple of years trying to perfect a spelt version, and I think I've finally done it. And in there we're going to add our sugar. So we've got just 150 grams of sugar, or 3/4 of a cup. And I've got butter already softened, so it's soft to touch, and that's unsalted butter, and it's 150 grams as well. And just 1/8 teaspoon of salt. So now we're going to beat all of this up together until it's well combined. So with the reverse creaming method, we're trying to get the butter to form like little sandy grains within the flour. I forgot to add my food colouring. Let's pop that in, sorry. I was getting carried away talking. So I'm using a good quality gel paste. So you just need to be careful because it's quite strong. So we're just using a teaspoon of that. I'm not going to be able to get that teaspoon in. Let me go in with, I'm going to use my 1/4 teaspoon and just put a little bit. Now this is, because there's a gel paste, this is quite strong. So let's talk red food colouring. This Pro Gel brand is really super strong and great, and you only need a teaspoon of that. I couldn't buy that, so I bought this other brand by Dr. Oetker. I had to use the whole tube of that because it wasn't that strong. So just depending on what you've got at home, you may need a little bit more than a teaspoon. So now we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar. And we need to put in 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla. But if you mix this around and you think, oh, I still don't think there's enough red food colouring, we can always add a little bit more. Because the last thing you want is your red velvet cake looking brown. So I actually think I'm going to add a little bit more. So let me grab this back. I'm going to add another teaspoon. It's better to add a little bit at a time than too much. Different brands react so differently. Look at that. Now we need to add an egg one at a time, and I've got 2 large eggs here, and I like to crack it into my little ramekin, just in case there's any shells. Stop and scrape. Stop and scrape. Let's stop and scrape. And if you're new here today, consider subscribing. All you need is a Google account, hit the bell, and then you get notified when I've got a new video or a new recipe. We'll add the other egg, mix it for about 30 seconds. Last but not least is our buttermilk, and today I'm using real buttermilk in the first one. So let's add half of it. We've got 125 mils. So I'm going to add half first. Do a bit of a scrape because we want to make sure everything is lovely and combined. Now let's add the balance of this buttermilk. Now we're going to mix it on medium for about 30 seconds. Now I've got my cupcake tray ready with little papers. I like to use my ice cream scoop, but if you don't have an ice cream scoop, grab 2 little teaspoons. We want to scoop out so we've got about 1 scoop per hole. Got a little bit left over, I'll deal with that shortly. So I'm just going to tap it a few times. Let's bake this in our preheated oven for about 15 to 20 minutes and can't wait to show you. So recipe 2, I'm going to do the same recipe, but I'm using oat milk that's been soured with apple cider vinegar. So once again, we need to sift our flour and our cocoa. And I've got my baking soda and salt. Then we add in our caster sugar, 150 grams. And we need to add in our red food colour. So I'm going to be generous and I'm just using a 1/4 teaspoon here so I can get into the bowl. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons, which is probably the rest of my colour. But I would highly recommend, if you can get the Pro-Gel brand in your country, I found that's the strongest and you only need 1 teaspoon. So under some of the other brands you need more. So my butter was getting a little bit soft on the bench, so I just had to put it back in the fridge because you don't want it too squishy and you don't want it hard. It's like the perfect texture. Let's hook my bowl on. So I'm going to whip these up until they're combined. I just want the butter broken so it looks like little fine peas. And that's good. Then we add in our vinegar. So I've got 1/2 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. And our vanilla extract, 3/4 teaspoon. Just mix that quickly. And then we're going to add an egg one at a time. And I use large eggs. I'm going to stop and scrape it. In this bowl you can actually see what I'm doing, which is good, except that it's quite large. I'm going to add my pretend buttermilk. So I've got 125 mils of oat milk and I've added in 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. So that's my homemade oat milk, homemade buttermilk, sorry. So let's just whip that up. And I just want to show you whether there's a big difference between using oat milk that's been made to be buttermilk or real buttermilk. Now you could also add lemon juice to sour that as well. And if you're worried about your cakes tasting like vinegar, the vinegar flavour disappears once it's all cooked. I'm just going to bump this up to medium and mix it for a minute. Got a few bits that were on my beater, so I'm just going to give it one more quick mix. Grab that off the stand mixer. Once again, use an ice cream scoop or 2 teaspoons. And let's scoop it out. And if you're wondering, can you make this vegan? I have actually made it vegan. I've done flax egg instead of my real eggs and used non-dairy butter. And they worked out fine. They were really, really good. But I did use oat milk and not the buttermilk. Okay, tap that. Let's bake these for 15 minutes. Just check your oven. You may need 20 minutes. My oven always runs a little bit hot, so they always take a little bit less than what other people take. So you may need to leave them in for 20 minutes. So our cupcakes are all cooked and it's ready to make the icing. So I've got 180 grams or 1 tub of Philly cheese, Philadelphia cream cheese, in my bowl, and I'm going to sift in 3 tablespoons of icing sugar. Now, my version of cream cheese frosting is not too sweet. I decided to use my tiny sifter because I thought it'd be easier, but maybe I should have got my big one out, but it was wet from before. Let's do a little taste test. I'll just add a little bit of maple syrup, but I think I'm only going to do 1 teaspoon. I just like the difference of sweetness by adding the maple syrup. We can add more icing sugar. The other thing you could do is add a little bit of lemon as well. So I'm just going to do a simple version today. I'm not going to pipe it or anything. I'm just going to scoop it on to the cupcakes. And I'm not going to ice them all because I'm going to pop some in the freezer. Just to show you the difference, this is our cupcake that we did with the real buttermilk. And they're quite red. And I think I ran out of red food colouring, so these are a little bit browner. But the texture on these ones is really good as well. So the oat milk does work. The only difference I can say is they domed a bit more, but I think it was because my butter was a bit warm. So we can cover that with the cream cheese frosting. So I'll just show you what I do. I'll just grab the icing spatula and I just scoop on a little bit. And you can actually do this when you're ready to serve them. And then what I'd like to do is I sacrifice one of the cupcakes and I just grab some of the sprinkles and just pop it on top. So it looks like a cafe style. And I'll do that to these ones. Actually, they're still a bit warm. I'm not going to do those just yet. And I usually do this amount of cream cheese for about 12 cupcakes. Just depends how generous you are with the cream cheese. So I'm going to finish icing all them off camera. I'm going to come closer and I'm going to do a taste test showing you the 2 different versions. So let me come closer. So here we have, this is our regular buttermilk. So it's really soft and spongy. Let me do a taste test. Moist and light, delicious. It's got that velvety texture. This is the oat milk one. Not quite as red because I ran out of food colouring. The texture is still really good. I don't think you could actually tell that it's made with oat milk. So if you can't get buttermilk where you live, sour your own milk and make homemade buttermilk and you can make red velvet cupcakes. I hope you've liked my challenge today. Pop a comment below if you give this recipe a go and what your little tweaks are or what your preferred way of doing red velvet cupcakes is. And hit the thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here today. And share this with a friend. I'll pop a few other ideas up above. I've also got a red velvet loaf cake that I've made. I'll put the recipe up above. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye. Yum, yum, yum.